It's going to be recorded. Awesome. So folks are able to catch it who might not have been able to make this time. But thank you all for coming to this webinar titled Smart Growth for Small Communities. This is a Grow Smart Maine webinar, and we're really excited to have brought together some amazing experts in their communities to share so much great insight with us today. So we'll get started. First of all, thank you so much to our sponsor, Kennebec Savings Bank. We're very appreciative of that sponsorship to make this work and so much work happen. I wanted to start by sharing a bit about Grow Smart Maine, just for folks who might be new to the organization. So Grow Smart Maine supports communities in navigating change by convening to action, sharing thought leadership, and advocating, all in alignment with smart growth principles. You can see the work that we've supported in every corner of the state, and it's all really magnificent stuff. And then I know it's a webinar, so we can't really see everyone in the room, but ideally you're a community agent who's wanting to understand more about how you can leverage the human resources in your region to create connected, resilient, and supported communities. And then a bit about this webinar. This webinar will highlight how communities across Maine are advancing smart growth goals in a range of scales. So municipal offices, service organizations, and informal social groups all play a role in building, maintaining, and strengthening the social fabric of their small communities across the state. And we have three amazing panelists here who are going to share so much insights from the communities that they're based in and that they work in. And hopefully attendees will gain a better appreciation for small communities and the role that they play in growth at a state scale, as well as understanding how smart growth principles can be scaled for communities of various sizes. So with that, we're going to start the webinar with some introductions from our panelists, and I will pass it to Tanya.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming. My name is Tanya Rakowski. I'm the Community Resilience Coordinator for the Down East region, which is Hancock, Waldo, and Washington counties. I work out of Sunrise County Economic Council. And I started off with the Park Ranger and Land Trust Director, and here I am still doing science stuff, which I'm really enjoying. I think pop over to the next one there. Thanks. So the Community Resilience Partnership looks at different ways we can help towns that are small with capacity in particular. All the towns I serve have 3,000 people or less, which means they don't have a lot of staff to do all the things that we'd like to do to improve our resilience. So we help them write grants, we provide them with technical assistance, and we help the community get together and plan and think about what they want to do. So for me, that means on any given day, I might be working on things like how to get an EV charger in a town, or how we can build a bikeway, designing a community to improve our infrastructure. I do a lot of work with seawalls, working waterfronts, bridges, sewage treatment facilities. We do resilience planning, protect land and natural resources. I often tell towns, if you have a problem that's there on your horizon, let's think about the way that climate is intersecting with that problem, because almost all of the problems towns are facing have some sort of climate aspect to it. That dovetails really strongly with what I love to do, which is being outside and hiking and gardening. And because of that, you can hop forward the screen. And that's just a little bit about where community resilience projects are happening. And there's more all the time. There are a whole bunch just released a few days ago. So there's a lot of towns undertaking projects right now, and there's a lot more goodies to come. Go forward, please. So on an informal level, I'm also part of this walking group called the Basin Babes. And that's what got me into having a conversation with you all today. Because while there's a lot of very well-organized groups doing work like the Community Resilience Partnership, there's also quite a lot of informal groups that add a lot to their communities. And I've realized as I've worked with this group of women that these groups really depend on good walkable communities. So I live on a cape, it's a dead end. There are about 15 women I walk with every day. I think the mean age is about 75. And the value they bring by being in a place where they can walk has really stunned me. I started talking to them about, what they're doing and where they're going, and almost all of them are alone. And they are able to continue living this lifestyle because they are part of an informal group that supports each other and they get a lot of exercise. So it's really interesting to me. They take care of each other's medical problems. They bring each other food when they're sick. They have phone chains. They do rides. And they don't just support each other, which, like 3 days ago, we're walking along. Oh, there they are. And one of them says she's having a hard time breathing when we go up hills. So we started nagging her. You need to go get checked out. You need to go get checked out. No, no, I'm fine. I'm fine. You know how people do this. Well, she went and got checked out, and her artery was 80% blocked in her aorta. Like, we saved her life because we nagged her, and she wouldn't have gotten that kind of care and support if she was home isolated. And so it really kind of surprised me how important these groups are. We have to provide them with a habitat. And so it's got me very committed to bike ped work, which has always been part of what I do. But increasingly, we hear a lot of times, oh, rural communities, you can't really walk to the store. People don't really walk to work or bike to work. So it's kind of low priority. And I think we need to reevaluate that, because having or not destroying the walkable places in our communities support our community. These ladies don't just take care of each other. They're also definitely have impact on how fast people drive, and they calm traffic. In fact, they like aggressively calm traffic. I've seen them in the middle of the road, like chasing lobster boats, telling them to slow down. And later on, they're getting an email, because like that with Cousin Biff. And they also, look after crime. They protect each other's homes. They protect the whole community's homes, and they run all kinds of community activities in our little town. So I want to see that prioritized as we go forward, and that's kind of the two hats I'm wearing in this conversation.
Thank you so much, Tanya. And I'm going to pass it over to Luke to introduce himself and the work that he does.
Thank you. My name is Luke Dyer. I'm the manager for the town of Van Buren, a small community in true northern Maine, up on the Canadian border. I became the manager 2 years ago after retiring from a 31-year career in law enforcement. Van Buren was once a vibrant community in the 1950s. It had the nickname Christmas Town, and basically due to all the unique shops and small shops that adorned our main street. Next slide. Oh, there, you're on the right slide already, sorry. However, due to decades of economic decline, our town fell into a really deep low, with the municipality ended up owning over 50% of our downtown buildings in 2022. Next slide. In 2023, I applied for a grant through the Citizens Institute on Rural Design. It's a program funded by the National Endowment for the Arts. The program assists communities in navigating design challenges in the revitalization process. And our challenge was multifold. How do we recreate our downtown, being conscious of our rich Acadian and French Canadian culture? How do we respect our community's incredible history? How do we create resilience through climate-friendly projects? Or how do we incorporate the arts and implement creative placemaking into our rebirth? Next slide. So through a combined guidance of Gorell Palmer, an engineering company that's working with us through our Maine DOT's Village Partnership Initiative, we were able to identify several green spaces in our town ripe for reinvention. We have plans, and if you look on the lower right of that slide, we're building a 1.7-mile pedestrian cycle trail system called the Acadian Historic Pathway, and I'll explain a little bit more about that shortly. We're building a large park in a former neighborhood that was lost in a flood in 2008 called Grant Street. That's in the upper right-hand side. That park will include a 30 by 80 greenhouse with 10 community garden boxes for people in the community that want to grow their own food, but don't have the access to that possibility because they're either apartment dwellers or other reasons. The project has been funded mostly through the Community Resilience Project. Thank you, Tanya. That's one of the organization that she works for. Following a presentation with the third cohort, which is again is the Citizens Institute on Rural Design, In a monthly gathering, I was contacted by a professor who works at Georgetown University, who is an adjunct professor at Drexel University's Westfall College of Arts, Media, and Design in Philadelphia. Professor Scott Schmidt was interested in working with the town of Van Buren to create a 10-week curriculum project that involved research, art, and design. And that's why I am on this panel today. Together, he and I guided a class of 6 graduate students to create the Van Buren Historic Pathway. And I'll actually post a link to the presentation that they did to our town council in the chat after I'm done introducing myself. The project includes 10 art pieces selected on their importance in the history of Van Buren. For example, we had ferrymen who used to operate a ferry across the St. John River, transporting people to and from the Canadian border crossing in St. Leonard, New Brunswick. We also, one of the other pieces will be an antique telephone, which represents the historic Hammond Hotel that was in Van Buren. It was one of the very first hotels in Aroostook County that had a telephone in each room. It was very unusual at that time. The art pieces will be 3D printed in bronze, and they will include tap technology. So a user walking on our pathway will come to one of these 10 art pieces. They can walk up to the piece, tap their telephone on it, and it'll open up a page on their tablet or their phone, and it'll have photos and a complete historic description of what that piece represents. So there'll be several of these different pieces out there. One of them is a log to represent the logging industry, a potato barrel. Another one is a sabot, which is a wooden clog that our Acadian ancestors wore. So it's really a neat project. When they open up the page, they'll see pictures and get historic information. What's great about it is, as we learn more about who maybe those ferrymen were, we can add that at any time to that piece of program, which is great. And additionally, we can do special events using the same technology to do storybook walks for kids, so we can change the objects, what happens when you tap them. And so it gives us an opportunity to do a lot of unique things. And next slide. Next slide. Yep. And then further projects for our downtown, just trying to bring our community together and trying to bring people to our community. We've received funding to complete a few more projects that include a silhouette art and lighting project that will begin this summer. We're turning that ugly underpass that goes to our beautiful boat landing into a silhouette and art lighting project. It'll be unique in the US. I don't think I've seen anything like it anywhere here. I think it'll be very exciting once we get it completed. And we're also in the project development phase of creating a star stage that will be overseen by our Music on Main Street committee, just to name a few of our ongoing community gathering projects.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Luke. And then last but not least, I will pass to Claire to introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. I'm Claire Emmerich. I'm the Community Resilience Coordinator at CB, or the Center for an Ecology-Based Economy. We are a climate justice nonprofit based in Norway, Maine, where we've been in our Main Street office for over 11 years now. I'm always a little nervous when I do these that someone will walk in the middle, because we do have a storefront, but that's part of the fun of being a Main Street organization. So next slide. So today I'm going to highlight a few of our front burner projects that we're working on, and can get into it more as we chat later on. But this is one of our big ones. We're working on the Norway Equitable Housing Cooperative. This is going to be a resident-owned and resident-led housing development project. We've been working on it since 2021, when a group of local renters came together to discuss the housing crisis in our part of the state and to try and brainstorm solutions for addressing that crisis. And we've come so far since then. We were able to purchase our dream site just 2 blocks off of Main Street and across from the Allendale Community Garden. You can see it in the bottom left-hand corner there on the map. It came, it was an abandoned lot. it came with buildings that we unfortunately couldn't salvage, but we were able to purchase the lot, demolish the buildings, and are now working with architects and engineers to put together our design for some net zero affordable housing. So this project is really trying to, flip the script of what affordable housing development looks like, and put power into the hands of residents, while also trying to aim for the type of buildings we need to be building from here on out, which is net zero. So next slide, please. And you'll see a bit of a theme here. We love our cooperatives at CB. Another cooperative we're incubating is the Maine Community Power Cooperative. This is a community solar cooperative, which will be both worker and consumer owned. And we were very, very fortunate to incorporate this cooperative recently and receive $2.9 million from the DOE for this project. So we are hoping to break ground later this year, and it's different in a few different ways. These are really small projects, so less than 1 acre, 20 trackers, which will be able to generate power for 50 to 80 households on each site. And the goal here is, again, to flip that narrative. Obviously, we've seen some kickback against community solar because when it was rolled out, it was quite an extractive approach, which we often see in energy generation, even with renewable energy, where out-of-state developers came in and in many cases chose sites that were not the best place to put the solar farm. And we saw all sorts of kickback, moratoriums, especially in our part of the state. And so we're trying to, again, show that there's a better way to do things, a less extractive model, a model that keeps the power in the communities, and directly benefits the people who are using the solar energy that's harvested on these sites. And just a quick note, you'll see some critters in the top left there. Well, are also trying to incorporate agrivoltaics into these farms. So either doing PFAS remediation on sites where there is PFAS, or on sites where it's safe to grow food, hopefully incorporating that, or grazing critters. So that's a really exciting piece of this project. Next slide, please. And then finally, I'll just mention, we're also involved with the Community Resilience Partnership. So that's my primary role at CB. I lead our work with municipalities as a service provider through this program. And we've worked with 12 towns so far to help them enroll and apply for their first grants, and are just getting started with another 4 who will be going through that process leading up to the next round of deadlines this coming fall. And can definitely go into more details later in the webinar, but just wanted to highlight that this program has really been a game changer, because many of the communities we work with are super low capacity, many times mostly volunteer run, maybe with a few part-time staff, who without CB support and support of the regional coordinators working in this part of the state would not be able to go for this funding. And frankly, probably wouldn't be talking about climate change. Maybe they'd be talking about some of the impacts, but they wouldn't be framing it as climate resilience. So it's been a really great opportunity to bring community members together to talk about what their climate priorities are, and actually plan for the future they want to see. So with that, I'll let us get into chatting.
Thank you so much, Claire. And before I kind of transfer over to the fireside chat component of this webinar, I wanted to briefly mention that one of the things I love the most about Maine is that we're all so connected, even across like the state. And so I'm seeing this person with their Maine Envirothon t-shirt on from the same year that I participated in Maine Envirothon in high school, indicative of having the same t-shirt as this person. And I do not know who they were, but we were part of the same program, and I just love that. So thank you to all 3 of our panelists for introducing themselves. As indicated, the rest of this webinar is very much going to be a fireside chat kind of structure. And so I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to kind of briefly, we're going to like transition technically over to this next component. But I am going to be asking the panelists some questions. for the sake of structure, I'm going to kind of toss questions to different panelists, but Tanya, Luke, and Claire, you're all welcome to answer any question, even if it's not directed towards you. Would love for this to be as conversational as possible. And I'm also going to try and drop the questions in the chat as I'm asking them in case folks need to read it instead of just hearing it. So the first question is for anyone to answer, and I know Tanya spoke a little bit about it as part of her introduction, but I'm curious if you guys can expand upon what role you or your organization does to really strengthen the social fabric of your community, and what are some examples of this in action?
Well, I can jump in and answer that real quick, I guess. As the head of my community, I guess it's my job to lead us into a promising future through citizen-desired initiatives and needs. We have to do what our people want. It's not what Luke Dyer wants or what our town council wants. We got to do what our community wants. And so many of our projects do involve strategic placemaking, which is tried and true to revitalizing rural communities like ours. And some of the examples we've taken into action, we started hosting some information sessions on the first Saturday of every month, just simple things just to bring people with like interests together. This past weekend, we actually hosted a model train information session. It brought 16 people together from 6 of our area communities, which we are very happy with.
Well, I'll go ahead. So I work for Sunrise County Economic Council, and I was kind of like, what's a greenie doing working for an economic council when I first started there doing ag work? But our focus is on prosperity. And the more we thought about what prosperity meant, the more broad we realized our mission was becoming. And so while we started off working with entrepreneurs and helping people start up their businesses and get business training and get into grant and loan programs to get them off the ground, now we do quite a lot of municipal planning. We do workforce development. We are doing housing redevelopment increasingly because we have such a problem with affordable housing. Rural heritage and sustainability, improving natural resource jobs. We've got a program going called Family Futures Down East that helps young parents who are trying to get into and get through college, get the support they need. So it's a 2-generational program. So the kids get support while the parents get support too to get through it, because it's a lot going to college with a toddler. And we're part of the Washington County Recovery Friendly Workplace Network to help people who've been impacted by substance abuse get back into the workplace. So we have our fingers in a lot of things. And of course, there's me doing community resilience now out of an economic council, which 10 years ago would have seemed odd, but I'm really thrilled now that it's like considered core business. And I think that's a wonderful way to be moving as a community.
I just chime in, Tanya, I heard you talking about some of the networks you're involved in, and I'd say that's our big role here is we're one piece of a really magical web of organizations who are working in this part of the state, especially in Norway, where I live. We're often collaborating with people like the Land Trust, with the Allendale Community Garden, with Norway Downtown, Lights Out Gallery. There are so many exciting, energizing projects going on, and it's not one of us that's bringing the community together, but it's when we collaborate that the sparks fly.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. This question is specifically for Tanya and Claire, and maybe Tanya, you can start by answering it first, and Claire, you can build on it. But it's been talked about kind of throughout the entire webinar so far, the Community Resilience Partnership, but I'm hoping you could tell us a bit more about what the Community Resilience Partnership is and highlight what types of resilience projects this partnership has been able to assist with in Down East Maine and in Western Maine.
So the Community Resilience Partnership is funded out of the Maine state government, and they provide us with both staffing time and also with a series of grants And then we also use that staff time to hunt for other grants and support them with technical assistance. So in the Down East region, we've put a lot of energy into climate resilience planning. That could mean comprehensive plan updates that integrate climate resilience into the thinking, flood mapping. And then in towns like Machias, we are using the funding we have to integrate all the things we have to do. I mean, Machias is in a really challenging place in that they are only 11 feet above sea level. They have a dike that's getting over top. They have a sewage treatment facility that's almost at sea level. They're looking at building a seawall, and they also have a salt marsh restoration project happening. So we use funds from CRP to coordinate all those moving parts because they have to physically link up for this to work. Broke Bluffs just got a grant to do a wildfire management plan. They're on a peninsula. There's one road in and one road out, and it's all forested. So they suddenly realized they could be pushed into the water. They had a pretty big fire last year. And so they're like, this is the moment. So they can do that planning now. And they're doing a lot of vegetation management, probably will go along with that. Cherryfield is looking at being a more bike friendly and walker friendly community. And at the same time, they're going to be stabilizing their riverbank, doing some biodiversity work because they have a lot of Japanese knotweed there. So planting it in with natives and food trees. In Whiting, we helped them get almost $3 million for a dam that they have that's right at the head of tide that they use potentially for when they have a wildfire, but it was blocking fish passage. So now they're going to get a new dam with a fishway. Everybody's like, yay, finally. Working waterfront money, about $2 million for Jonesport came out of work we've been doing through this program, again, to support those natural resource jobs. So really CRP can do quite a lot. There's 72 different tasks that towns can choose to chase. And those options are pretty broad. And at least from my perspective, like I will try to make that fit and work for them because I think, all of these things are about the long-term ability for our towns to stay and maintain their character. A quick shout out to Tremont, who put solar on its municipal landfill, and now they're powering their entire municipality.
We love landfill solar. We have that in Norway as well, although I wouldn't say it came directly out of CRP. That was actually a long project in the making that preceded the CRP. But I can share to our perspective a bit different role that we serve here at CB. As a service provider, we're specifically focused on helping communities enroll in the partnership, so going through that enrollment process and then applying for their first grant. We have seen, of course, once we establish those relationships, it's nice to keep working together. We're a very small org, and that's not necessarily the role that we intended to play when we got involved with the Community Resilience Partnership, but it's a great role to play because it means we've really been forming a lot of great standing, lasting relationships with communities out here. But just a few examples of projects that we've seen our towns do. Not unfortunately, fortunately, we're not facing sea level rise here inland. Of course, we have plenty of other flooding issues. But front of mind for most of the towns we work with is energy costs. They are spending a lot of money on really outdated heating oil furnaces and terribly weatherized buildings and facing a lot of issues there. So many of the towns we've worked with have gone for heat pumps. Hartford, Otisfield, Sumner, and Woodstock all have installed heat pumps in their town offices with this grant. The towns of Bethel and Sumner have weatherized buildings. We've done baseline energy assessments with local contractors in Bethel, Norway, Otisfield, and Woodstock. And we've had quite a few towns interested in installing solar too. So Hartford, South Paris, Norway, and Otisfield all either have projects underway or have installed solar, primarily on town office roofs. And we've seen some planning happening. I think it's going to become more common and more popular moving forward, especially after that low-hanging fruit is taken care of. But we've seen in the town of Norway, we helped them with the climate vulnerability assessment. We were holding the social vulnerability piece, and they also had an engineer doing infrastructure vulnerability. We've also had some communities interested in watershed assessments. So the town of Otisfield updated their watershed protection plan and is doing public engagement around that. We're currently helping the town of Casco with a complete streets and Vision Zero plan and some quick build demonstrations. And I think we're going to continue seeing towns, picking their eyes up, looking to the horizon and seeing how this program can help them with that long range planning, because that's where you get those larger grants, right? You need to have an idea of what comes next. And so we look forward to some of our towns moving in that direction.
Thank you both so much for those responses and insight. The next question is directed at you, Luke. It's a two-part question, but with just some of the revitalization you were talking about in the town of Van Buren, the first part is, how has community input shaped that vision and direction for Van Buren's revitalization? And the second part is, what methods do you or the town use to gather and incorporate this community feedback?
Yep. In 2012, the town of Van Buren, after the great 100-year flood, lost their immigration and customs building. They built a new facility here in Van Buren that was $40-something million. And part of that project was to give Van Buren a gift. And it was a surprise gift because nobody in Van Buren had any participation in what the gift was going to be. And they built a large moose statue in Van Buren out of bronze that is an emaciated, starving to death moose. If you search Google, just put Van Buren, Maine moose, you'll see pictures of it. It has a Maine Coon cat on its back. I don't know how many moose you've seen, but I've never seen one with a Maine Coon cat on its back after investigating probably 200 traffic crashes with moose over the years. It's got a Moxie can at its feet and a bunch of chickadees on its antlers. And I guess the point of this story is what it led me to think about is the Van Buren did not have the opportunity to participate in what that project was. And so the community didn't really get what they would have wanted to represent their community. And we didn't want that to happen going forward. So I started searching. I don't sleep at all, really. So in the middle of the night, I was searching and I discovered this program called the Community Heart and Soul Program that originated in Vermont. It's a wonderful program that helps guide you through community involvement into projects and not just revitalization, but just pulling your community together. And so we got involved with the Community Heart and Soul Program. We get a $10,000 seed grant through them to hire a coach that is helping us guide us through this process so that our community has an opportunity to be a part of it. We want them to tell us what they want. What do you miss about Van Buren? What did Van Buren have that you'd like to see again? What would you like to see? What are some of your fondest memories of Van Buren, and how can we bring that back? So that's one of the methods in which we're doing that. Also, through the Drexel grad program, when we were creating that art project, we were able to connect with 144 community members, either directly through a Zoom chat or through an online survey that we did with them, just to talk about what was important to them, what 10 objects and what 10 historical things about Van Buren would be valuable to you that you would like us to not lose. And, we've been tearing down, unfortunately, some of our historic buildings just got beyond repair. And we still have a couple others to tear down. But what we've been doing is collecting bricks from these buildings, and they will become part of this historic pathway. So some of the pathway will be built with historic bricks from these buildings and just, memorialize that way. And, I guess the goal of our community is to revitalize through what our people want and not what the government and the town manager wants to see happen, which is exactly what happened with that moose.
Thanks, Luke. I love I love / hate that moose story. So thanks so much for sharing it. Tanya or Claire, anything you guys want to add about community input and kind of revitalization from your perspective?
I think that's one of the real strengths of the CRP is um, there's a fair amount of complaining that the enrollment is a little bit challenging because the community has to come together and talk about what the community values. So that does slow down the process, but I think it makes the process very robust so that later on when we're working on this, there's a lot of ownership. And I think that is job one when you're doing this kind of work.
Awesome. Thank you. The next question is for everyone, and it might be the question of the hour. So feel free to take as much time on this as you would like. We're doing awesome on time. The question reads, how do you balance both the preservation of a small community's character and heritage with the need for modernization and growth?
I think for me, it's about understanding what aspects of that character and heritage you want to take with you. Because there's some really beautiful things about our small towns that we ought to be bringing along. And I think that can help us as we're pushing forward to keep that in mind. And the example that comes up for me is with our housing cooperative. It's kind of a radical project in a lot of ways. We're proposing a larger apartment unit, more dense development than Norway usually sees. It's going to be net zero, pretty modern buildings, trying to speak to the design of the buildings around it, but still, new development in Norway. And it's a cooperative, which we don't have in Norway. And there's very few housing cooperatives in the state. And so it's pushing the boundaries there. There's been some discomfort. But we've also seen the gift that's been given to us by the fact that we're developing where Ashley Everett used to live. That was Ashley Everett's home, and he was someone who was a long-standing community member. He lived in that house for 90 years, and everyone knew him, everyone loved him, and saw him as a representation of that neighbors helping neighbors spirit. He was such a community-minded person, and every time we go to the planning board, we end up talking about Ashley. Whenever we're talking to neighbors, doing canvassing, we end up talking about Ashley. And I think people see that neighborly spirit and that part of our heritage reflected in the co-op. And so as we're pushing boundaries, as we're trying to grow both our housing stock in Norway, but also our mindset about housing, we're able to take along that community-driven spirit, and that's been like a game changer for how the communities reacted to our project.
I really agree. I mean, it's a matter of looking at what we value as a community and then deepening those connections to the place. And like you were saying, Luke, that was lovely about the bricks, using the old to move forward into the next thing and balancing those old technologies and new technologies. I don't think there's a silver bullet or a one size fits all kind of answer. Each community has to think about it and respond on their own in their own context. Like we've seen here some concern about solar too, but on the other hand, it seems like wind and blueberry farms are a really good fit because blueberry prices are up and down, but having a few turbines on your big barrens that are right on ridges of hills they stabilize the farmer's income. So every year they're getting a check for that windmill. It has a very small footprint, and it means that those farms can keep on being family farms and they have this other stream of money. So it's like the perfect kind of match. And those are the matches I think we need to be finding. And I agree with you about the Village Inville. we used to have that. I've had conversations with folks in my own town in Addison where, I talk about, don't we want to do something different with pedestrian access downtown? Because people are afraid to cross the street in a town with 1,100 people. That is, I think, 100 square miles, including the bay that we circle. So, like, how can you be afraid to cross the street when the population density is that low? And they said, oh, are we talking about sidewalks? And a little old lady who happened to be around for the conversation piped up and she said, we used to have sidewalks. Well, we should have sidewalks again. Some of these old technologies work great. We've just kind of forgotten that we used to have sidewalks.
And for us, I guess, one of the things I preach every time we end up in a new group or something, I always say the same thing when we're talking about revitalization. When you come to the intersection of State Street and Van Buren and US Route 1 and US Route 1A, when you're stopped at that intersection, you still need to know you're in Van Buren. So no matter what we do to this community, no matter what changes we make, we have to make sure that people still know where they are. And that's super important to me, and it's super important to our community. And we have a couple historian brothers that have purchased the old Gaiety Theater. It was in their family in the past. And now they have been revitalizing that theater. And when I became the manager, I would walk outside of my office the first few months I was the manager. And I would go stand on the sidewalk and just kind of look up and down and say, okay, Dyer, how are you going to fix this mess? Like, where do we start? How do you even start? And then I'm looking at this building and before my eyes over those months, the building started to come to life. They were painting it, they were changing it. And it just, at that point, it dawned on me, if two people could make that much change, what if I had 50 people? What if I could get 50 people from my community together? What could we do together? And that 50 number has grown to 150, and the volunteerism, which is very difficult in many communities, has just gone up, and those guys really inspired the process forward. And again, you can't just bulldoze the whole town. You can't bulldoze them all down. You've got to find ways to revitalize them. And Van Buren, I will say, I've said this, I don't care who is in the room. I don't care if it was a former town manager or a former selectman. They made decisions that this town never had to fall in that type of decline. It never had to. It was just mismanagement and just terrible bickering, bad decisions. And we are not looking in the past, we're looking in the future to revitalize. But it really never had to end up like this. So,
I'm gonna say though, Luke, you've got me so excited. I want to go up and see Van Buren.
You're more than, we'd welcome you with open arms. That's what I tell everybody. We'd love to have you.
Thanks, everyone. I've talked to the three of you in the planning process before, but I still have goosebumps as you're speaking. It's really powerful, and I'm sure that I'm not alone in the attendees for the webinar, so thank you again. The next question is also for everyone. Chime in where you see fit. The question is, what are some of the most significant challenges that small communities face in terms of growth and resilience, and how have you seen these challenges successfully overcome?
So I'll answer that. I'll step in there first. So I think what a lot of small communities suffer from is volunteerism, a lack of volunteerism. And I think that was part of our problem initially. And at some point I realized that a volunteer is a volunteer. 10 volunteers are volunteers. And if you can start with one or two, and then have one or two of those people add another volunteer to the list, suddenly you grow pretty fast. So our Van Buren Revitalization Committee started off with only a few people and has grown into a significant group of people of all ages that love and wanting to see Van Buren revitalized. And I think that's one of the challenges. And it is, you can overcome it. And the other challenging issue is funding. Of course, it's always funding, finding resources to do unique projects. And before the webinar started, I was kind of talking to Tanya about, we just got a community resilience grant that really is so valuable to this town. It helps build that Grant Street Park. We're so lucky to get that funding. But there are other projects we'd like to do, and I'm finding that getting public art funding for projects is very difficult. It's a very big challenge. And I think, you know, the Main Street program and the CERD program and several other programs out there, I'm sure the Grow Smart Maine program as well realize that art is so vital to the revitalization of these rural communities all across the United States. And we need more access to dollars to make that happen. We can find the matches, but we do need some money to help get us started.
Luke, I love your point about volunteerism. And I was thinking our biggest challenge that we face out here is capacity. And that's the way to address that. We've had trouble in our part of the state with, just in the past 2 years, I'd say we've lost decades worth of experience and knowledge from long-term town managers and select board members and other town staff stepping away. And in a few of the communities we work with, we're having a bit of a revolving door effect of town managers coming in. We start to work with them, they move on to somewhere else, working with different interim town managers. And that's where, there is a town manager. There's lots of communities where it's just the select boards and same issue with town clerks. We've seen town clerks coming in and out. And every time that happens, they take some of that knowledge with them. And so that's been a struggle, just in addition to the fact that we're working with very small communities with limited capacity, even in the best of circumstances, we're just seeing institutional knowledge going out the door. So that's challenging, but I think that's where that volunteerism and that community spirit can hold it together. Because if you have, dedicated volunteers filling that gap and holding on to that knowledge, you can get a lot done. I look to Norway as a great example of that. We've been through a few different town managers just in the past 2 years, but I think we've been able to maintain the momentum because our select board is so passionate, and we have a lot of local committees who are working hard. I'm on the climate committee for Norway, and so we've been able to hold that and keep the vision of climate action for the town. We've seen the same thing in Otisfield. They've really benefited from having a climate committee. And so the communities who are able to, specifically around climate resilience, tap into the interest and the knowledge within their communities to just keep this action going, have really been able to get ahead and have been able to get a lot of that funding. We've seen Norway and Otisfield in particular as the communities in our area with climate committees. They've also been the ones who I think have received the most funding through the Community Resilience Partnership.
I think there's a lot of intersecting problems. There's the capacity lack, and Harold, what you just put in the chat about, there's a lot of distrust about new people with new ideas. We've seen that since COVID, people coming in who mean well, who have some capacity oftentimes, but they can sometimes be pretty tone deaf about how they interact with the community that's already there. And so I think there needs to be some bridge building there. That's one's a big challenge, and I find myself dealing with that a lot as a person with a funny last name who's clearly not from Maine. But I think that there is a way forward with that. If there's a serious conversation about grace and some patience and treating people with dignity and respect. I've seen both sides of that. I've heard some wild things on both sides. I was in a small town in very rural part of Washington County, and this fellow was complaining to me, these people have come from away and they want all kinds of different stuff in this town, and it won't make our town won't be the same town when it's all said and done. And we just can't have it. I said, well, what do they want? Because I thought maybe they wanted, I don't know, a multi-level car park. And they said, they want us all to have functioning septic systems. I'm like, I think that might be a good idea. On the other hand, I saw people from away saying, I'm coming up to Washington County during COVID, even though we've been told not to travel because I'm special and, I have, my needs are more important than the fact that we're all trying to stay in one place. And never mind that this community is one of the oldest communities demographically in the state. I'm going to come from New York City. And I'm like, what are you doing? Don't you care about your neighbors? So, they both need some time together. And I think a lot of bean suppers for that kind of thing. I think the other new people we have is we have a lot of young people who are talking about feeling disempowered. And we really, really need them. And we need them to get engaged with local government, local leadership, and into some of these community resilience groups so they can start to do the work. And also, nothing makes feeling disempowered go away more than actually taking on a project and seeing it come to something. Housing too, we'll talk about that.
Thank you all so much. I have an eye on the time, and just for group participants awareness, I'm gonna ask 2 more questions that are applicable to all of the panelists. If you have questions that you're thinking of right now, you can go ahead and drop them in the chat. Joe is gonna kind of facilitate some questions once we get through these pre-thought out questions. So with that, my second to last question before we open it up. If you had to share some like tips and tricks on how you build place-based capacity within your community or your organization to take on new projects and attract necessary resources, what would those be? I'm sure there's some folks who are listening in who are hearing of these amazing success stories and trying to apply it to their own communities, but they're like, how do you build capacity? We just don't have any of that. So what would you share to kind of for those participants?
I would say it's all about the networks for us, truly. So to bring resources to where you're working, oftentimes you need to go outside of where you are. You can build, the relationships within the community, and that's also a key part of this. But I'd say a lot of CB's success in our own projects that we've worked on and in guiding towns through thinking of what projects make sense for them. We often look to other communities to see what they're doing and actually reaching out and talking through, how did you do that? How did you do that climate vulnerability assessment? What should we be thinking about when we're engaging with people? So that's been huge, but even more, just the number of people working on these key issues around the state, whether it be housing, whether it be climate resilience, and so much more. We go to where those networks are. So that involves being involved with Grow Smart and attending the conferences, going to Build Maine. Tomorrow, our director, Scott, is going to something that's just about investing in housing at CEI. And so just connecting with others and trying to share those lessons, bringing those lessons, and when possible, bring those funds back to our communities. With the goal of eventually being able to go the other way, sharing out and having, a project that's completed and being able to say, this is how we did it, so others can follow that model. We can't do this if we're in a silo. So yeah, all about those networks.
And I hate the term out of the box thinking. I don't know why I hate that term, but I just do. I think that there's original thinking and there's I just hate that. I don't know. I have no idea why. But anyway, when I was able to get a group of people together that I knew were interested in revitalizing Van Buren as a whole, I think the most common thing they always hear from me is, I have an idea. I have an idea. What do you think of this? What if we did this? So one of those brilliant ideas that they are suffering from today is the creation of our Christmas in July celebration, which I can tell you, Van Buren didn't have 10 people together in the same room for the last 10 years. And last summer, we had 1,100 people at our Christmas in July festival, and so many awesome smiling faces, so much group connectivity, and from that, other things formed, other things created. Like our Music on Maine was created from that. Just you got to find ways to pull your people together in unique ways. That's why we started the little events we're having, bringing people together. Sheila Jans is one of the people that's sitting in this webinar, and I recognized at some point we had a lot of people in our community that were builders. They made things, they created things. They were either jewelers or artists, painters, musicians. And so I had a meeting here at the town office one night, bringing all of our Van Buren artists together. Let's bring them all together. Let's see what they have in common and what they may be able to do together. Maybe something will come of that. We had 11 different people that showed up that made things or created things. 2 of those people have downtown businesses today. Others are looking at the same thing. And we're looking at a big project right now. We want to turn our old, I'm in a fancy brand new town office that we purchased a couple of years ago. And our old town office, we're looking to revitalize that into a community market. And basically it'll be a small business incubator, kind of like a Saturday, I don't want to call it a farmer's market because that's not really what the goal is here, but to create a small business incubator in the center of our downtown where our municipal building is or was. And just pull those people in and give them a chance to see if having a business works, if what they have to offer is wanted by the public. But you've got to pull those people in together, and you just never know what you're going to get out of that. You've got to hold these little group meetings, and for us, it's been a great success. It's actually brought people that weren't connected together to do great things.
I think people often ask what they want. They're told, here's what you're going to get, here's what's available. And I think one of the things I've seen really energize communities working with CRP is we get together and we basically have a complaint session. What do we want? What do we want? What's important to us? I've come into towns where they think I have an agenda, that I've come from the UN to tell them about what they need. And instead, we end up eating some pizza, and they start complaining about, what it is that they'd like to do if only they had money. And by the end of the conversation, okay, then let's work on that. And it turns out the things that they want are reasonable and doable, and there are resources out there. So then you just start with that network, but it has to be community driven. And anything that's not community driven is going to be, I love it, the starving moose.
Mm-hmm. And you know what, like the other side of it is that if when you're building, and I find as I'm building the community, I know what the goalpost is. I know where that is, but I'm never going to kick a field goal from the 1 yard line. I'm never going to do that. But if I just keep kicking a little forward, if I just keep moving forward, and when I'm applying for grants, I'm always thinking that way too. Like, okay, what I want to accomplish may not be found in one grant, but I'm going to connect a bunch of pieces to this puzzle together to get the end result. And I think people get caught up with the overwhelming part of, I'm never going to get to the end zone. But if you just, and I'm not a football player, but just, you got to slowly, piece by piece, work your way to the end zone. So.
Thank you all so much. Luke, you set us up perfectly for the last question that I have for the panelists, which is, looking forward, what are some emerging trends or future goals of smart growth and community resilience that are happening in your town, that you're planning for in your town, and how are you planning to address those?
Yeah, so for us, I think it's the business incubator trend right now that I think is genius. So I went to Brunswick, Maine with the Maine Development Foundation. I was part of the ICL class, and we went and visited their business incubator. And I was so impressed with that. I think that is such a brilliant trend. It offers people that don't have a lot of resources to be able to try an idea, gives them a place to give it a shot anyway, to see if what their business idea or what their program idea is, and gives them a space to do that. I think that is a terrific trend. I think it's great for building communities. And you know, that's one of our goals. That's really one of our next projects, is that business incubator idea.
We're seeing along Route 1 quite a lot of development of solar power. And that's created some concern and skepticism. So one of the things we're looking at is helping towns build thoughtful ordinances so that the solar goes in a thoughtful place that doesn't change the character of the town, but also that we get the power. I'm somewhat concerned that because land is cheaper here than it is further south, there might be more pressure than is fair put on our region. And as our region's been, dealt blows of extractive resource activity in the past, I think this is an opportunity for us to get all the benefits of transitioning to greener power, but have that be a thoughtful, community-led kind of approach this time, just once. And I say that coming from coal country. It's just like, it would be nice if the people that were producing the power benefited from it and got to have a fair amount of decision making on how that was deployed across the landscape. I think the other thing we see happening is we have an aging population, and we have very economically challenged population where we are. And I think that means that we need real public transportation. And that's not something I'm hearing much about yet, but that's definitely where my heart's going, because, we need to cut this romance with cars to drive. Everybody drives to the grocery store. I mean, you've got to be kidding me. We don't need to do that. There's definitely going to be a place for cars in the future, but we need to rethink our transportation networks in rural areas. And we're only at the very beginning of that, but it needs to constantly be put on the agenda, because what we're doing right now is just ridiculously expensive in terms of fuel, and also in terms of road maintenance and all the things that go on associated with it. And people's lives, frankly. Every year we have more people getting hit by cars. And that, it's just unacceptable.
Yeah, to the population point, Tanya, something that's always on my mind these days is climate migration. It's definitely an emerging trend. We've had people call the office here and say, hey, I live out west. I'm looking to move to Maine to escape some of the climate disasters that I'm facing out here. Is Western Maine a safe place for me to be? Like, I've had that conversation multiple times. And so it's starting to happen. But the thing is, it's an opportunity, right? Because we do have an aging population. Like, we need more people here. And it's going to, if we do this the right way, if we're planning for it, it can be so great for our communities, for our economies, and it's an opportunity to do better this time. So I see a lot of opportunity there. I'll say, I don't know where to go from here. We haven't had conversations with our communities, apart from the fact that it comes up when we do our community engagement for the CRP. People are thinking about it. People are talking about it. And I'm hoping maybe on the regional level, maybe on the state level, maybe even beyond. I know there's some work, across the Northeast looking at climate migration, but I'm hoping we can start really getting down to it and planning and figuring out what we need in place to prepare for that and make it an opportunity.
I think on the micro level, we're seeing that too. A year ago, I was told, don't even think about talking about towns moving uphill away from the ocean. And now communities are quietly moving parts of their town uphill. So we also are going to have some internal movement, and that's incredibly painful emotionally for people to let go of a place that might have been in their family since the 1700s or even longer, with some of our Passamaquoddy communities here. So that's another one coming down the pike really locally for us.
Thank you all so much. So with that, we're going to switch over to kind of this more open Q&A. We have a good amount of time here. And so I will kind of pass it over to Joe, who will be largely facilitating those questions. And if anything pops up for folks, feel free to drop it in the chat or send it to Joe directly.
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, thank you to all the panelists. That was an awesome hour or so of you guys just ripping through some of the questions, and certainly inspiring. And I know Larissa said she had goose pimples. Me too, at a couple different points. And we got some good questions coming in, some in the chat, some to me. But the first one that popped into my mind, and the one that caught my attention at least, and this is somebody who's like done some broadband and digital equity work in the past, but as it relates to this conversation, and Mary Ellen Barnes brought this up in the chat, where she said that she would like to add digital equity as one of the spokes on the hub for small towns, strengthening rural resources, et cetera. And I'm curious about what you all see in terms of, if I can kind of transpose that into a question, what you all see as like the impacts of being connected, having like affordable connections, having the infrastructure for that, or not, like the absence of that, and how that plays out in your communities or the communities that you're working with.
I think it's super important in terms of lowering our carbon emissions. It gets people off the road, and it's also important for people's security. We can do telehealth out in these rural communities. We have a community, the next Cape up for me, where they don't have internet going into community. The library has internet. And so we have kids that drive to the library in the dark, in the winter, to sit outside and do their homework. And, is this the best we can do for our communities? It's utterly not. I think having this broadband here is really going to improve the security of the whole region. And CRP supports it. So if you're looking for a grant to do that kind of work, and it doesn't seem like it's climate resilient stuff, but it's totally in there. So hit us up.
Yeah, I think broadband is such a resilience issue, and I'll say, there's that piece of it. And we were recently approached by Community Concepts, who's working a lot on digital equity for our part of the state and has been mostly focused on broadband, but is also hoping to collaborate to think about how emergency communication plays into this idea of digital equity and how broadband plays into emergency communication. It's all connected, but especially as we're having more severe flooding events. I mean, I know I was glued to my computer during the December storm, just watching all the Facebook groups in the area, and that was where information was being shared. We didn't necessarily have a plan in place for communicating that otherwise. And so it was just so front of mind, and hoping we can keep that moving in the right direction in this part of the state.
In Van Buren, we applied for a community connectivity hub grant through Maine Connectivity Authority. It's the only grant that we did not get that I applied for this year. I'm a little salty about it, but the first thing I thought of, and it's been the same thing all along, like you don't just, it is such an excellent project. It is such a cool concept to build a place in our community that we could provide education, that we could provide a conference space for groups to be able to go in and have a professional conferencing system. The concept included 2 telehealth rooms. I mean, we are very remote up here. It's a 5.5-hour drive to Portland. It's a 7-hour drive to Boston. And to get to any local hospital, you're looking at least 45 minutes to an hour. So, having the ability to create that kind of telehealth system would have been super valuable to us. I'm not a quitter, as you probably just figured out. And we're already on to trying to find funding to do it another way. And again, there's the goalpost. The goalpost was that one big grant, but I'm going to kick the ball down the field through different grants until I make it happen. We're going to make that happen. It would be super valuable to our community, and it just has to exist when you're in a rural, landlocked community like we are. We don't have any municipalities that we abut. We're 20 miles from any structured municipality. So, we have to do things like that to to enhance our community.
Interesting. Thank you all. John Boynton put in the chat, have you, or rather, how have you dealt with the negative citizen who doesn't understand that community development is economic development? I see Luke nodding his head.
Yeah, that's really easy for me because economics in our name. But yeah, I think when you frame it as, we're protecting the downtown. Like when we go to Machias, this work is protecting the downtown. That's where all the businesses are. These things aren't hostile towards each other. They're supportive of each other. And I think people are starting to see that on the coast where they're seeing their working waterfronts being damaged. It's dollars and cents, and it brings out the practicality in people, which leads to problem solving. So that's very heartening.
Yeah, I think, I think for us here, our town suffered a lot of negativity over the last several years, from 1970s on. People were not proud to be from Van Buren. And we've worked really hard through multiple avenues to make people proud again. And, those negative citizens, part of the issue is they're just not informed. Nobody has actually educated them about what you're trying to do. They're hearing it at the gas station while they're standing around with a bunch of other people that don't know what they're talking about. And I think the important thing is to make sure that you're just putting out that information. And it doesn't take long to start bringing some of those people aboard. And they are your biggest advocates once you have them aboard. And that's kind of the trick, is to get those people on your side. We had our annual town meeting last night, which I dread every year. That's probably why I have no hair anymore. And just one of those deals where you've always got somebody in there that's asking questions that the answer's right in the book, but you have to steer those people in the right direction, and it has to look like it's invisible. You have to be transparent, and that, I think that is the secret.
It's so important, I find, when someone comes in hot to say, I hear you and your concerns are valid. It takes all the wind out of their sails. And then, turn it and say, so the question is, how do we take these things that you value that are legit and put them in the context of these other things that we value and are legit? And now we're in a problem solving team, figuring it out instead of being like this.
Great. Thank you both. I had a question come into the chat, and this relates to age in Maine. Last time I checked, Maine is still the oldest state in the country, but we still have young people here, right? It's like, and we have middle-aged people, and we have all these folks. So this question is about intergenerational conversations and collaboration, and what you're seeing, if you're seeing that type of thing in your neck of the woods, or like maybe what are some of the best practices to encourage those types of conversations between generations?
So I'm living in a house right now with an 84-year-old and a 20-year-old. And the conversations have been really interesting and sometimes kind of frightening. I think one of the things I've heard from my daughter is that, she was for 2 years in high school, they didn't talk to anybody. And so I think there's a style of communication that is quite different than the very top-down, authoritarian approach that somebody who was born in the 30s might bring as far as their expected behavior that a young whippersnapper would have when they're interacting. And I think the more they do interact, the more that respect will be built. But it is a big challenge. And for me, I spent some dinners in my office.
Yeah, I mean, just by virtue of me being a young person, all of my interactions through the CRP are intergenerational conversations, because I'm mostly working with people who are of retirement age or beyond. And frankly, it's a challenge when it comes to engagement. I'm thrilled when we get someone anywhere close to my age at our community engagement meetings. But in terms of what I'm seeing in Norway specifically is there's a lot of intergenerational conversations happening around specific issues, people coming together because they care about something, whether it be the housing cooperative, like people of all ages are struggling with housing right now. So that brought people together and provided a container where other conversations can emerge because we're sharing a vision of addressing a single issue. I've seen it with the climate committee as well. We have for a community in this part of the state, a pretty good range of people on that committee representing a lot of different perspectives and stages of life. And it's been really just empowering to see everyone come together. And I haven't seen many issues with our communication styles there, although I'm sure it can emerge. I know it does emerge in other spaces, but I think coming into those spaces with, just as Tanya was saying earlier, like that mutual respect and understanding, and just like seeing the person in someone else, and being willing to have tough conversations together while still maintaining grace can go a long way if and when there are different communication styles.
So Vebjørn has a live museum called the Acadian Village. That is, the average age of the people that are running this village is 80, no doubt in my mind. And I went to talk to them about, helping them promote themselves a little bit more. It's an amazing place. It really is. It's fantastic. All the buildings are, brought back into original Acadian, early Acadians, our settler times and stuff. It's really terrific. And I was trying to explain to them about QR codes. I could have better described how to land a lunar module on the moon. It was hilarious, but fun. And now we have quite a few young people starting to get involved in the village, which is super important because we cannot lose that village. It is the only one of its kind like it east of the Mississippi River, really. It's fascinating. And but again, it comes back down to volunteerism, and it's kind of fun when you see the younger high school age kids that are given the tours at the museum. And I had a conversation with them about the fee they charge for the tour. It's a $7 tour, and they won't budge. Like, people won't pay $10. They won't pay $10, what they keep saying. And I'm like, you know how much easier it would be if you could just pay $10 and not have to give any change? But no way, man, it's not going to happen until a new guard is there or something. I don't know, but it's entertaining. It's a fun part of our population to work with. So
I think we have to get them interacting with each other, and respect is built through interaction. Otherwise, it's very easy to sit back and say, okay, boomer, and for them to sit back and say, they don't know anything. Yeah, they've got to start interacting with each other.
What does that look like, though? Is that like a bean supper? Is that like a, like what are the venues for that? I'm curious.
Yeah, I feel like community garden, because it's one thing we can all agree on. It's non-confrontational. We all like to be outside in the sun. We all like to play around, and we all like to eat tomatoes.
the response often is, it's worked this way for 30 years. So why would we change that? And that's always an entertaining conversation.
And in my house, the conversation is always, is it? Has it? And I think, those are conversations that need to happen. And then you start to see that granularity emerge, where people are saying things like, hey, when I was a kid, things were terrible. We have done so much, and I'm committed to the same kind of things that you're committed to. I just don't know how to do a QR code.
I double down on the community garden. That's exactly what came to mind. And I think play, like a garden gives space for playing together. I know, in our region, contra dances can be that. Otisfield has some like rockin' community contra dances in their community hall that attract all ages. And so yeah, I think playing together and being in community together probably needs to come first to build those relationships, ideally, and then we can have some of those deeper conversations.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. We had a speakeasy last weekend, which was pretty hilarious because some people had seen it before.
Well, I'll just say, like, Claire, I think that last point that you made about play is like interesting in terms of encapsulating some of the conversation that has happened here today. Where we know that, like, right, like communities have to be places where we live and we, you know, there's shelter, there's food, there's like the necessities of life. But like what makes a community great is that level of like joy that's found in these places. And I know that, you know, it's like you go town to town in Maine. And there are kind of tax-based constraints. There are things that people bump up against in terms that are very real obstacles to that. And this panel has been inspiring to me personally today, just in terms of you guys doing it in your neck of the woods, finding ways to make places not just like healthy, but happy and thriving, which are, yeah, exceptional. I don't have any more questions for you. Do you have any final statements, I suppose, that you'd like to end this with? While I throw a survey in the chat for whoever's left.
I just gotta say, go outside and talk to your neighbors. Just like get to know them. That's the biggest thing I think that builds communities.
And I just think do try something. If you think of something, just try it. Just introduce it to other people that might be interested and just try it, see what happens. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. If it works, you're amazing success. You know, and it just grows into something better. And I think that's part of the problem. People are just afraid to try. So we're trying everything. I don't care what it is. We'll do anything here to try and see if we can't pull people together. I think that's where the success of our last 2 years has come from.
Yeah, I think I would just double down on the playing since it came up. And you know, I think having just having places in our communities to keep it light together, you know, that's where we can find the inspiration and the hope that we need for that collective problem solving that needs to happen. So thanks for putting this on. I'll add that to my final statement. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Tanya, Luke, and Claire so much. This was amazing. Even being part of the planning process, it was so much more amazing than I even thought it was going to be, and I already thought it was going to be awesome. So thank you for your time and sharing your expertise. I'll share again that Joe dropped a survey in the chat. If folks had time, that would be amazing. I had a slide I was going to end on, but it feels really unnatural to pull up a slide again. So I'm going to drop our panelists emails that are also in the chat. If any questions came up or any follow-up that you would like for Luke, Tanya, or Claire, that is there. And then lastly, almost lastly, I wanted to share a link to some more Grow Smart Maine webinars where you can find kind of some of our happenings. We'll offer some similar programming in the future. We've offered it in the past, so stay tuned to kind of see what we've got shaking up over there. And then just a final thank you to Kennebec Savings Bank for being our sponsor and supporting so much of the work that we do. So with that, thank you all so much. I really appreciate everyone's time and sharing this space and sharing this knowledge. So thank you.
Thank you. It was a privilege. Thank you.
Bye, folks.
See y'all.